In a city where skyscrapers pierce the heavens and luxury knows no bounds, cameras capture everything. The grainy night vision footage shows two silhouettes meeting in the shadows of a palatial villa's guesthouse. Their fingers touch briefly before they disappear inside, unaware that this fleeting moment has been recorded, preserved, and will eventually destroy them both. Dubai, November 2023. Emergency vehicles converge on one of Jumeirah's most prestigious addresses, a sprawling mansion owned by Farid Al-Mansour, international business magnate and rarely present patriarch. The private ambulance, unmarked police cars, and coroner's van create a dissonant tableau against the manicured perfection of the property. Something has happened here that wealth cannot fix. Two figures stand apart from the commotion. A Filipino woman in a plain house dress clutching a cleaning rag she's forgotten to put down, and a Sri Lankan man in a press driver's uniform, his face a mask of practiced neutrality. They don't look at each other, not even once, but the tension between them could power the city's grid. What investigators discovered over the following days would reveal a web of desperation, forbidden love, and betrayal that stretched from the luxury palaces of Dubai to the desperate villages of Southeast Asia. This is the true story of how power imbalance, cultural displacement, and surveillance created the perfect storm for tragedy. The security cameras meant to protect the wealthy would instead expose the darkest secrets of those who serve them. If you're drawn to stories that expose the dark side of wealth and privilege, stay with us for this entire journey. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because the footage we'll uncover will leave you questioning everything you think you know about the price of survival. Analyn Macaraig wasn't born to be a servant. The daughter of a schoolteacher in Batangas, Philippines, she'd completed 2 years of nursing school before economic reality crushed her dreams. Her father's stroke in 2017 drained the family's modest savings, and Analyn, at 27, found herself facing the choice so many Filipinos confront: stay home in poverty or leave to support those you love from afar. Just 3 years, she promised her mother as she kissed her 4-year-old daughter Ligaya goodbye. "I'll save enough for Papa's care and Ligaya's education. Then I'll come home." 6 years later, that promise remained unfulfilled. The recruitment agency took 80% of her first year's salary as placement fees. Her first employer in Kuwait confiscated her passport and worked her 18-hour days with no days off. Her second position in Saudi Arabia ended when the male employer's expectations became clear. Each time she escaped one bad situation, debt and desperation pushed her toward another. By the time Analyn arrived in Dubai in early 2023, her daughter was 10 years old and knew her mother primarily through video calls and the monthly remittances that paid for her private school education. Analyn carried the weight of this absence like a physical pain, one she hid beneath perfect posture and downcast eyes. "You're lucky," the agency representative told her as they approached the Al-Mansour villa. "Mr. Farid travels constantly, so it's mostly just his son at home. The pay is excellent, and you'll have your own room in the guest house." What the representative didn't mention was Adham Al-Mansour, the 18-year-old son who considered the domestic staff his personal entertainment during his father's frequent absences. Nor did she mention that Analyn would be the 5th housemaid in 14 months to take this position. When the imposing gates swung open to reveal the gleaming white mansion with its perfectly manicured gardens and sparkling infinity pool, Analyn allowed herself a moment of hope. Perhaps this time would be different. Ruwan Perera's journey to the same household began thousands of miles away in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Until 2022, he'd led a respectable middle-class life, university-educated, English-speaking, with a small import business and a modest apartment. Then came Sri Lanka's economic collapse. Hyperinflation devoured his savings overnight. Food shortages led to riots. The business he'd built over a decade crumbled in months. With an elderly mother, 2 sisters, and 3 nephews depending on him, Ruwan made the only choice he could. He accepted a position as a private driver in Dubai, leveraging his immaculate English and professional demeanor to secure a salary that could keep his family fed back home. "You are fortunate," his employer, Mr. Al-Mansour, told him during their brief meeting. "Many Sri Lankans work construction in the desert heat. You will drive an air-conditioned Mercedes and live in comfortable quarters. What Mr. Almansor didn't say was that comfort and dignity were not the same thing. That Ruwan would become invisible behind the wheel, spoken about but rarely to. That his prestigious university degree would mean nothing in a country where nationality determined status. For 3 years, Ruwan had performed his duties with quiet excellence. He drove Adham to school, then university, then to clubs and friends' homes. He chauffeured Mr. Almansor to meetings when he was in town. He maintained the family's fleet of luxury vehicles with meticulous care. And he did it all while becoming increasingly hollow inside. The Almansor villa was an architectural marvel, 20,000 square feet of imported marble, soaring ceilings, and panoramic views of the Dubai skyline. Mr. Farid Almansor, half Emirati, half French, had built his fortune in international shipping and logistics. His rare appearances at home were marked by expensive gifts for his son and brief, clinical conversations with the household staff. "My father built this house to impress people he doesn't even like," Adham once told a friend loudly enough for the staff to hear. "I'm just trying to get some actual use out of it." That use primarily involved pool parties when his father traveled, which was nearly 280 days of the year. The property included a separate 2-bedroom guest house where Ruwan and Analyn lived, far enough from the main house to provide the illusion of privacy. What wasn't immediately obvious to new staff was the network of security cameras monitoring nearly every corner of the property, 24 cameras in the main house, 6 in the guest house common areas, 12 across the exterior grounds. Only bedrooms and bathrooms were exempt from surveillance. For security, Mr. Almansor explained on the rare occasions when someone asked. The unspoken reality was that the cameras were as much for monitoring staff as for protecting against intruders. The household employed other workers who came during the day, a gardener, a pool maintenance technician, occasional caterers for Adham's parties. But only Ruwan and Analyn lived on site. This created a peculiar dynamic, one where they saw each other daily but spoke rarely, each protective of their private suffering. Adham Almansor's first interaction with Analyn established everything about their future relationship. On her 3rd day at the villa, as she dusted the massive living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Persian Gulf, he approached silently and watched her work for several minutes. "You're prettier than the last one," he said, causing her to startle and nearly drop an expensive crystal vase. "Thank you, sir," she replied automatically, eyes downcast in the way she'd learned provided the safest response to male attention. "My father hired you because the agency said you were mature and responsible," he continued, making air quotes around the words. "But that just means old, right?" "I'm 32, sir." Adham laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. "Ancient. The last girl was 22, but she cried too much." "Will you cry if I'm mean to you, Analyn?" The question hung in the air between them, a test with no right answer. "I hope to give you no reason to be displeased, sir," she finally responded. "Boring answer," he sighed, already losing interest. "Anyway, I'm having friends over tonight. Make sure there's food. Something with chicken, not too spicy." He turned to leave, then added over his shoulder, "And Analyn? Wear something nicer than that ugly uniform when you serve us." This became the pattern of their interactions, Adham asserting dominance through small humiliations, Analyn navigating his moods with the expertise of someone whose survival depended on it. He would switch off the air conditioning in her room during the hottest months. He would accidentally spill things moments after she'd finished cleaning. He would invite friends over without notice and expect elaborate meals to materialize. What Adham couldn't understand from his position of immense privilege, was that his casual cruelty was merely another form of hardship to endure for Analyn. She'd weathered worse to keep sending those monthly payments home, to hear Ligea's excited voice describing her school achievements, to maintain the hope of eventually returning to the Philippines with enough savings to start a small business. When Adham's father was home, the young man transformed, becoming the perfect, respectful son. These rare glimpses of how differently Adham could behave only highlighted Mr. Almansor's willful blindness to his son's true nature. "My boy is completing his business degree soon," Mr. Almansor told Ruwan during a rare conversation. "He will join my company next year. He has a good head for business, like his father. Ruwan, who had driven Adham to clubs rather than classes more times than he could count, merely nodded. Yes, sir. Very impressive. But the cameras saw everything. The expensive surveillance system recorded Adham's cruelty and Analyn's stoic endurance. It captured Ruwan's resigned expression as he waited in the car for hours while Adham partied. It documented the growing isolation of two people living on the margins of unimaginable wealth. And soon, those same cameras would record something unexpected developing in the guest house after dark. Something that began as simple human connection but would ultimately lead to tragedy. If you're drawn to stories that expose the dark side of wealth and privilege, stay with us. What these cameras eventually reveal will shake this household to its foundation and expose the terrible price of power imbalance in a world built on exploitation. Make sure to subscribe, because in our next segment, we'll show you how isolation and shared suffering can create bonds strong enough to destroy everything in their path. Analyn's day began in darkness. At 4:45 a.m., her alarm would vibrate silently under her pillow, a habit formed to avoid disturbing others, though she lived alone in her small guesthouse bedroom. By 5 a.m., she was already in the main villa's industrial kitchen, preparing coffee that would be ready when Adham woke, usually around 10 a.m. unless he'd been out especially late. The kitchen cameras captured her morning ritual with mechanical indifference. The way she massaged her lower back while waiting for the coffee to brew, the quick exercises she did to loosen stiff shoulders, the moment she paused before a reflective surface to practice her neutral expression. What the cameras couldn't record was the mental arithmetic constantly running in her mind. 143,000 dirhams saved so far, another 87,000 needed for Ligea's university fund and a small business back home. 2 more years in Dubai, maybe 3 if expenses rose. By 6:30 a.m., Analyn had already cleaned the living areas from Adham's previous night's entertainment. Empty bottles, food containers, occasionally drug paraphernalia that she discreetly disposed of. The cameras recorded her collecting women's undergarments from behind sofa cushions, wiping spilled drinks from imported marble, and rearranging furniture that had been moved during parties. They documented the mechanical efficiency with which she erased all evidence of disorder before breakfast preparation began. "You missed a spot," Adham would often say when he finally emerged, pointing to an area she had meticulously cleaned. His morning ritual included finding fault, manufacturing reasons to scold or belittle. "Sorry, sir. I'll take care of it immediately," was always Analyn's response, regardless of whether there was actually anything to clean. The physical toll of housework accumulated in invisible ways. The chemical burns on her hands from cleaning products, the strain in her lower back from bending and lifting, the chronic shoulder pain from repetitive motions. In her bathroom, the only place without cameras, Analyn kept a small medical kit with pain relievers and muscle bombs, rationing them carefully to make them last between her rare days off. Lunch preparation, laundry, garden maintenance, more cleaning, dinner preparation, evening service, kitchen cleanup, preparing the house for the next day. Analyn's work continued without pause until 10 p.m. most nights, sometimes later when Adham had guests. What sustained her through these brutal days were the brief calls to her daughter, scheduled during Ligea's morning preparation for school. "Mama, I got first in mathematics again," Ligea would exclaim, her voice tinny through the phone speaker but filled with pride that made Analyn's exhaustion momentarily lift. "That's wonderful, Anik. Your grandfather would be so proud." Analyn would reply, careful to keep her voice down even in the privacy of her room. These 5-minute connections to her real life were the anchors that kept her from drifting into despair. When her workday finally ended, Analyn retreated to the guest house, a modest 2-bedroom structure separated from the main villa by an ornamental garden. There, she found brief moments of peace. A hot shower that temporarily soothed her aching muscles, a cup of ginger tea that reminded her of home, 10 minutes of meditation before sleep claimed her. These small rituals were acts of self-preservation, maintaining the inner core of her humanity in circumstances designed to erode it. While Analyn navigated the interior world of the Al Mansour villa, Ruwan operated in the external sphere. His uniform, pressed white shirt, black slacks, polished shoes, and a cap he removed indoors, was a costume he donned each morning at precisely 7 a.m. Behind the wheel of the family's Mercedes S-Class, BMW X7, or occasionally Mr. Almansour's Bentley Continental, Ruwan projected an image of impassive professionalism. The exterior cameras captured his morning routine, checking each vehicle, wiping away desert dust, verifying fluid levels and tire pressure. What they didn't record was the pride he took in these tasks, the way this attention to detail connected him to his former identity as a business owner who valued excellence. Ruwan's days were dictated by Adham's social calendar. Most mornings began with driving him to the American University of Dubai, where he was theoretically studying business administration. More often than not, Adham would emerge from the building within an hour, having made only a token appearance before instructing Ruwan to take him to a friend's villa, an upscale cafe, or one of Dubai's luxury shopping malls. "Wait here," Adham would command, leaving Ruwan sitting in the parked car for hours, the engine idling to keep the air conditioning running in Dubai's punishing heat. Professional protocol prevented him from using his phone for entertainment, eating in the vehicle, or leaving his post. These long stretches of enforced idleness were a special kind of torture for a man who had once managed a staff of 15. The dashboard cameras, installed primarily to protect against accident claims, documented the increasingly concerning behavior Ruwan witnessed. Adham drinking in the back seat despite UAE's strict laws against alcohol. Adham and his friends discussing women in degrading terms. Adham making phone calls where he impersonated his father to access clubs or reservations. "My father built this city," Adham once boasted to friends, though his father's company had constructed exactly 0 of Dubai's buildings. "People like him create everything, while people like them," gesturing toward Ruwan's silhouette behind the wheel, "contribute nothing." Ruwan's face remained impassive in the rearview mirror, the practiced neutral expression of someone who had learned that invisibility was his best protection. In the evenings, after delivering Adham to nightclubs where he would be retrieved by hired car services when too intoxicated to call for his regular driver, Ruwan found solace in his own rituals. The garage cameras captured him meticulously cleaning each vehicle, regardless of whether it had been used that day. Inside his small guesthouse bedroom, free from surveillance, he would read books ordered online. Philosophy, history, politics, maintaining the inner life of his mind while his external circumstances remained constricted. The guest house where Ruwan and Analyn lived was modest by the standards of the main villa but luxurious compared to the crowded labor camps where most migrant workers resided. 2 bedrooms flanked a shared living area with a small kitchenette and eating space. The furniture was outdated but comfortable, cast-offs from the main house's previous renovations. Large windows overlooked a portion of the garden not visible from the villa, providing a sense of privacy that was largely illusory given the outdoor cameras. For both Ruwan and Analyn, this space gradually transformed from mere accommodation into sanctuary. Here, the performance required in the main house could be partially relaxed, though never fully abandoned due to the cameras in the common areas. Still, the psychological distance from Adham's domain provided essential respite. An unspoken code existed between them during their first months of cohabitation. They acknowledged each other politely but minimally. They maintained careful schedules to avoid inconveniencing one another in shared spaces. Most importantly, they never complained about their employer or his son, aware that such conversations would be recorded and potentially used against them. This professional distance began to shift as Adham's behavior toward Analyn deteriorated. What began as casual disrespect evolved into something more targeted and sinister. "You know what they say about Filipino women," he remarked one afternoon, cornering her in the laundry room. "Very accommodating to their employers." Analyn continued folding his shirts, eyes downcast. "Your blue shirt is ready for tomorrow's presentation, sir." Adham moved closer, blocking her exit path. "I'm talking to you, Analyn. Don't you think it's rude to change the subject?" "I apologize, sir. I didn't mean to be rude." Her hands continued their work, though the camera caught their slight trembling. "My friend Saeed says his family's maid gives excellent massages. Special ones. Do you have that skill set too?" His hand reached out, touching her shoulder in what could be interpreted as an accident but was clearly intentional. Analyn stepped back, bumping against the washing machine. "I should check on dinner, sir. Your father mentioned he might call tonight." The mention of his father was enough to make Adham retreat, But such incidents multiplied. The security cameras recorded him accidentally brushing against her in hallways, entering rooms where she worked alone, making comments about her appearance or clothing. What they couldn't capture was Analyn's growing fear, the way her heart raced when she heard his footsteps, how she began to create mental maps of escape routes in every room. Ruwan witnessed some of these interactions when driving Adham and Analyn to the grocery store or when both were in the main house simultaneously. The cameras captured his troubled expression, quickly masked, when he overheard particularly inappropriate comments. As a male employee from a different country, he felt powerless to intervene. His own position was precarious, and interference could mean termination and deportation, cutting off the financial lifeline to his family. The catalyst for change came on a sweltering August night. The air conditioning in the guest house malfunctioned. Later investigation would suggest deliberate tampering by Adham, though this was never proven. The temperature rose to unbearable levels, driving both residents to the small shared balcony where a slight breeze provided minimal relief. Ruwan, emerging from his room to find Analyn already seated on the balcony's single chair, retreated to fetch another from inside. When he returned, he was carrying not just a second chair but 2 glasses of iced water. The security camera captured him wordlessly offering one to Analyn, who accepted with visible surprise. "Thank you," she said, the first words between them that weren't strictly necessary for household coordination. They sat in silence for several minutes, sipping their water and watching the distant lights of Dubai's skyline. The camera recorded this tableau without capturing its significance. 2 isolated people sharing space without pretense or performance for the first time. "It reminds me of the view from Gal Face in Colombo," Ruwan finally said, gesturing toward the glittering horizon. "Not as tall, but the way the lights reflect on the water." Analyn nodded. "In Manila, from Baywalk, it's similar. Beautiful from a distance." That night, they spoke for 30 minutes, about their home cities, about weather and food, careful to avoid any mention of their employer or current circumstances. It was a conversation remarkable only for its normality in a setting where normal human interaction had become foreign. As they finally rose to return to their rooms, Ruwan paused. "Would you like tea? I have some good Ceylon from home." The camera recorded Analyn's momentary hesitation, then her nod. "I would like that. Tomorrow, perhaps after work." This small exchange, barely noticeable on the security footage later reviewed, was the first thread of connection between 2 people surviving in parallel isolation. Neither could have anticipated how this fragile bond would eventually reshape and threaten their entire existence in the Al-Mansour household. If you're starting to see how power and isolation create dangerous dynamics, hit that like button. What begins as a simple human connection in a dehumanizing environment will soon evolve into something far more complex and risky. Subscribe now, because the relationship forming in this guest house will eventually shatter the carefully maintained facade of the entire Al-Mansour estate. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in late September. Adham had hosted friends the previous night, a gathering that devolved into the usual chaos of entitled young men with too much money and too little oversight. Analyn spent the morning scrubbing dried alcohol from imported Italian tiles, retrieving crystal glasses from the garden, and attempting to remove mysterious stains from the living room's cream-colored sofa. The security footage captured the moment Adham emerged at noon, hangover evident in his sluggish movements. It recorded his slow circuit of the freshly cleaned space, his deliberate pause by the dining table where Analyn had arranged fresh flowers. What the cameras couldn't capture was his intention, the calculated cruelty forming behind his bloodshot eyes. "Disgusting," he announced, sweeping the vase off the table with a casual backhand. Glass shattered across the floor Analyn had just mopped, water soaking into the hand-knotted Persian rug beneath. "Clean it up." The cameras recorded Analyn's immediate response, the way she knelt without protest to gather the larger glass shards, her practiced movements betraying no emotion. What they couldn't record was the way her heart raced, the tightening in her chest, the mental calculation of how many more months of this she needed to endure. "My mother keeps calling," Adham continued, standing over her as she worked. "She wants to know why I never visit Dubai anymore. Should I tell her it's because her replacement is so ugly I can't stand coming home?" Analyn continued cleaning in silence, her eyes fixed on the task. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," he demanded, foot nudging her thigh hard enough to unbalance her. A glass shard sliced into her palm, blood immediately welling up and dripping onto the white tile. "I asked about your husband yesterday," Adham continued, voice deceptively casual. "My father's HR person says you're single. Abandoned, right? He left you with a kid and ran off to Saudi. Probably found someone younger." The security camera captured Analyn's momentary stillness, the first crack in her professional facade. Blood continued dripping from her hand as she remained frozen in place. "Can't blame him, really," Adham continued. "Who wants damaged goods? That's why you're here cleaning my floors instead of having a real life." What happened next occurred just beyond the camera's range as Analyn rose and moved toward the kitchen to dispose of the glass. The audio captured Adham following, his voice lowering to a whisper. "Maybe we can arrange something that benefits us both. Extra money for your daughter. All you have to do is—" The kitchen camera activated as they entered, capturing Analyn's palm raised in a stop gesture, blood still streaming from the cut. "Please, sir. I need to bandage my hand." Adham's expression shifted to something darker. "Don't interrupt me, Maid. Know your place." His hand shot out, grabbing her injured wrist and squeezing until she gasped. "Your visa renewal is coming up soon. My father listens to my opinions about staff. Remember that." The camera recorded him releasing her with a small shove before stalking away. It captured Analyn bracing herself against the counter, wrapping a kitchen towel around her bleeding hand. What it couldn't capture was the moment something broke inside her, the protective wall between survival and despair crumbling after years of careful maintenance. Ruwan returned from driving Adham to a friend's villa an hour later. The exterior cameras recorded his routine check of the vehicle before he headed toward the guesthouse for his afternoon break. The guesthouse cameras captured his pause at the entryway, his attention caught by the sound of muffled crying from the small kitchen area. He found Analyn seated at the table, her injured hand awkwardly bandaged, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The camera recorded his hesitation in the doorway, the moment of decision, and then his quiet approach. It captured him retrieving a first aid kit from beneath the sink and wordlessly sitting across from her. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her makeshift bandage. The camera recorded Analyn's surprised look up, the tear tracks on her face, and her slight nod. It captured Ruwan's gentle unwrapping of the blood-soaked towel, his careful cleaning of the wound, and his precise application of antiseptic and a proper bandage. What it couldn't capture was the electricity of human contact after months of isolation, the relief of kindness after cruelty. "Thank you," Analyn whispered when he finished. "I'm sorry you had to see me like this." "No apologies needed," Ruwan replied, voice equally soft. "We are all human, despite how they treat us." The simple acknowledgement of their shared humanity broke the final barrier between them. The cameras recorded their conversation that afternoon, over 2 hours of quiet exchange, beginning haltingly but gradually finding rhythm. They spoke of their homes, their families, the circumstances that had brought them to this guest house in Dubai. "My husband left when Ligaya was 2, Analyn explained, the pain still evident 6 years later. Said he was going to Saudi Arabia for work, sending money home. First year, he called every week, sent half his salary. Second year, calls became monthly, money became less. Third year, nothing. Just disappeared." "I'm sorry," Ruwan said, and meant it. "My wife died 4 years ago. Cancer. Before the economic collapse. Sometimes I think it was a blessing she didn't live to see everything we built disappear." The camera captured their growing ease with each other, the way their chairs gradually moved closer, how their voices softened to prevent carrying to the microphones. What it couldn't capture was the recognition passing between them. Two people who had each endured profound loss, now finding unexpected connection in their shared exile. That evening marked the beginning of a new routine. The security footage from the following weeks showed a pattern emerging. Late-night conversations in the guesthouse kitchen after Adham was asleep or out for the evening. The cameras recorded Ruwan teaching Analyn to make proper Ceylon tea, Analyn demonstrating how to fold Filipino lumpia. They captured the two sharing meals at the small kitchen table, Heads bent close together, voices kept deliberately low. One night, Ruwan arrived with a small photo album he'd kept hidden in his room. The camera recorded them sitting side by side on the couch. Analyn's genuine delight as he shared pictures of Sri Lanka, his childhood home in Colombo, his mother and sisters, the small import business he'd once owned. In turn, she showed him photos of Ligaya on her phone, pointing out her daughter's school achievements. The gap-toothed smile so similar to her own. "She has your determination," Ruwan observed, studying a photo of the girl proudly holding a mathematics certificate. "And her father's stubbornness," Analyn added with a small smile. "But she won't have his irresponsibility. That's why I'm here. To give her choices I never had." Their cultural exchange expanded beyond photos. The kitchen camera captured Analyn humming Filipino folk songs while cooking, Ruwan joining with Sri Lankan melodies that somehow complemented hers. They shared stories of festivals and traditions, religious customs and family celebrations, rebuilding through these exchanges the cultural contexts that had been stripped from them in Dubai. The first physical contact beyond necessity came 3 weeks into their new friendship. The living room camera recorded them washing dishes together after a shared meal, Ruwan washing while Analyn dried. Their hands brushed as he passed her a plate, and instead of pulling away, their fingers lingered for a moment. The camera captured their momentary stillness, the tension in that suspended moment, and the small, cautious smiles that followed. They both understood the risk they were taking. Unmarried men and women living together was already technically against UAE law, though overlooked in the case of domestic workers. Any romantic relationship would violate not just their employment contracts but potentially expose them to legal consequences. More immediately, discovery would mean instant termination and deportation, financial disaster for both of their families. Yet the connection between them grew, nurtured in the narrow spaces between surveillance. They discovered the blind spots in the camera network, a corner of the garden behind the bougainvillea where the angle was wrong for coverage, the 10 steps between the garage and the side entrance where no camera quite reached, the 5-minute window when the system backed up files at 2:17 a.m. each night. In these stolen moments, their relationship deepened. The garden cameras captured what appeared to be casual conversation as they tended plants together on Analyn's day off, but missed the way their hands met behind the broad leaves of a monstera plant. The garage cameras recorded Ruwan teaching Analyn basic car maintenance, but couldn't see their fingers intertwining beneath the raised hood. What began as comfort evolved into affection, and finally blossomed into something neither had expected to find again: love. The guest house became their sanctuary, what they began to call our island, in whispered conversations. They developed a language of subtle signals and code words, a system for communicating under constant surveillance. Ceylon sunset meant Adham was in a dangerous mood. Manila morning signaled it was safe to meet in their kitchen after midnight. Remember the jasmine in Colombo Park? Became their way of asking if the other was okay after a difficult day. Ligaya would love this view, was their reminder of why they endured their circumstances, for the futures they were building beyond this place. One night in early November, after a particularly harrowing day where Adham had thrown a glass at Analyn for serving his breakfast too cold, Ruwan made a confession in the safety of their kitchen island. "I've been saving," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Not just sending everything home, keeping some back. Almost 60,000 dirhams now." Analyn's surprise was visible even in the grainy camera footage. "How? Where?" "Separate account. Under a friend's name. Driving other clients when Mr. Al-Mansour is away. Airport pickups, tourist families." "That's dangerous," she breathed, though her expression showed admiration rather than censure. "Not as dangerous as staying here forever," he replied, reaching for her hand beneath the table where cameras couldn't see. "I have a plan. Another year, maybe less. Enough to start a small business. In the Philippines, perhaps, where Ligaya is." The camera captured Analyn's widened eyes, the moment of realization that he was including her in his future plans. What it couldn't record was the way her heart raced. How possibility suddenly bloomed where resignation had lived for years. "Together?" she asked, the question containing worlds of meaning. "If you want," he said simply. "I think I think we could build something good. The practical obstacles were enormous. Their passports were held by their employer, standard practice despite being technically illegal. Their visas were tied to their specific jobs. Leaving without proper documentation would make them illegal immediately, unable to exit the country through normal channels. Yet, for the first time, these problems felt surmountable rather than insurmountable. "We need to be careful," Analyn whispered. "Save more. Make a real plan." "1 year," Ruwan agreed. "We can endure 1 more year." What the camera recorded was 2 people discussing recipes at a kitchen table. What it missed was the birth of hope, the dangerous power of possibility, and the silent vow to find freedom together, whatever the cost. In a household built on power imbalance and surveillance, they had carved out something the cameras couldn't fully capture: authentic human connection. If you're invested in their dangerous romance, smash that subscribe button. The bond forming between Analyn and Ruwan offers them salvation in their isolating world. But remember, in a house where every movement is recorded, secrets have an expiration date. What happens when their private world collides with Adham's entitled rage? The discovery that's coming will change everything in ways none of them could predict. The security system in the Almansor villa was designed to be comprehensive, not compassionate. Its cameras recorded every movement. Its microphones captured every whisper. All data preserved for 30 days before automatic deletion. For months, Analyn and Ruwan had navigated its blind spots with increasing skill, their careful choreography creating the illusion of safety. But even the most vigilant can make mistakes when comfort begins to replace caution. It happened on a rare day when both Adham and his father were away. Mr. Almansor on business in Singapore, Adham on a weekend trip to Abu Dhabi with friends. The entire property felt different without their presence. The atmosphere lighter, the surveillance seemingly less oppressive. Perhaps that's why Analyn and Ruwan allowed themselves a moment of uncharacteristic carelessness. They had spent the morning working on their escape plan, discussing routes and options in the presumed safety of the garden's furthest corner. The afternoon sun was brutal, driving them back into the guest house where Analyn prepared a light lunch of Sri Lankan egg hoppers that Ruwan had taught her to make. The kitchen camera captured their easy domesticity, the comfortable rhythm they had developed when alone. What they failed to notice was the living room camera's direct line of sight when Ruwan reached across the kitchen counter to brush a strand of hair from Analyn's face, his hand lingering against her cheek. The gesture itself was innocuous, tender rather than passionate, but unmistakably intimate. The camera recorded Analyn leaning into his touch, her eyes closing briefly, a soft smile transforming her usually guarded expression. Worse still, it captured the words that followed. "When we leave here," Ruwan said, voice low but audible, "I want to wake up to this face every morning." 147 days, Analyn replied, turning to kiss his palm. "Then we'll be free." The moment lasted less than 15 seconds. They quickly resumed their careful distance, continuing lunch preparation with professional detachment. Neither realized their secret had been irreversibly compromised, captured in high-definition clarity, and preserved in the system's digital memory. Adham's discovery of the footage came 3 days later, born not from suspicion but boredom. Home alone while nursing a hangover, annoyed that Analyn had the day off and wasn't available to bring him painkillers and food, he idly accessed the security system's archive on his laptop. His initial intent was mundane, checking whether friends had taken anything during a recent party, but random scrolling brought him to guesthouse footage from the previous weekend. The exterior cameras recorded Adham's Mercedes pulling into the driveway that evening, his unsteady walk to the front door suggesting he'd been drinking. What they couldn't capture was the calculating gleam in his eyes, the sense of power that had energized him despite his earlier lethargy. He had watched the incriminating footage multiple times, eventually downloading a copy to his personal drive, insurance against the system's automatic deletion. Analyn returned from her day off the next morning, taking a taxi from the small apartment where she visited with other Filipino workers on her rare free days. The kitchen cameras recorded her immediate resumption of duties, preparing breakfast, tidying rooms that had deteriorated in her brief absence, restocking the refrigerator with fresh produce she'd purchased on her way home. She was arranging flowers in the living room when Adham finally appeared, dressed with unusual formality for a day at home. The cameras captured her standard greeting, eyes appropriately lowered, voice professionally pleasant. "Good morning, sir. I hope you had a nice weekend." "Interesting weekend," Adham replied, circling her with deliberate slowness. "Though not as interesting as yours, apparently." The camera recorded Analyn's momentary pause, the slight stiffening of her shoulders before she continued arranging flowers. "I just visited friends, sir. Nothing special." "Friends," Adham repeated, drawing out the word. "Is that what you call Ruwan now? Your friend?" He made air quotes around the word, his smile cold. The security footage showed Analyn's hands freeze among the flowers, her face carefully turned away from Adham. "Mr. Ruwan and I are colleagues, sir." "Colleagues. I see." Adham pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it toward her. "Colleagues who touch each other like this?" The living room camera captured Analyn's reaction as she glanced at the screen, the blood draining from her face, her hand instinctively reaching for the table's edge to steady herself. The footage Adham displayed showed her and Ruwan in their unguarded moment, his hand on her cheek, her eyes closed in a moment of evident affection. "That's not," she began, but Adham cut her off. "Not what? Not allowed? Not legal? Not in your contract?" His voice remained conversational, but the camera caught his eyes hardening. "All of the above, actually." Analyn stood perfectly still, a prey animal sensing a predator's approach. The security footage captured Adham's slow circle around her, his practiced intimidation technique, while her eyes darted toward the doors as if calculating escape routes. "My father would be very disappointed," he continued. "He trusted you both in his home, gave you comfortable accommodation, good salaries. And this is how you repay him, engaging in immoral behavior under his roof." "Please," Analyn finally whispered, the word barely audible to the microphones. "Please don't tell your father." The camera recorded Adham's satisfied smile. He had her exactly where he wanted her. Deportation would be automatic, of course. For both of you. Imagine poor Ruwan, returning to Sri Lanka with nothing. And you, what would happen to your daughter without your income? Ligaya, right? Pretty name. The mention of her daughter's name sent visible tremors through Analyn's body. The security footage showed her hands clenched at her sides, knuckles white with tension. "What do you want?" she asked, voice hollow with defeat. Adham stepped closer, invading her personal space while maintaining eye contact. The camera captured his next words clearly despite his lowered voice. "I've always thought you were attractive, Analyn. Too serious, too professional, but attractive. I think we could come to an arrangement that would benefit both of us." The living room camera recorded the moment understanding dawned on Analyn's face. First shock, then revulsion, finally devastating comprehension of her situation. Adham's proposition was clear without being explicit: sexual favors in exchange for his silence. "I have work to complete," Analyn said, attempting to move past him toward the kitchen. Adham's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with enough force to make her wince. The camera captured this moment with dispassionate clarity, his fingers digging into her skin, her futile attempt to pull away. "Think carefully about your options," he said, voice hardening. "Your little romance costs you both your jobs, your visas, everything. Or you can be nice to me and I forget what I saw. Simple choice." The footage showed him releasing her with a small push, his expression smug with the certainty of someone who had never heard the word no and meant it. "I'll give you until tomorrow to decide," he added, already turning away. "Though I can't promise the video won't accidentally get sent to my father while I'm waiting." The exterior cameras tracked Analyn's path from the main house to the guest house, capturing her stiff posture, her mechanical movements, the way she pressed her hand against her mouth as if physically holding back a scream. Inside the guest house, beyond camera range, she finally collapsed, the enormity of their situation crashing down with unbearable weight. This was how Ruwan found her when he returned from driving Mr. Almansor to a business meeting. Curled on her bed, silent tears streaming down her face, one hand still pressed against her mouth to muffle any sound. The guesthouse cameras captured him rushing to her side. His protective instinct overwhelming caution. What happened? Are you hurt? His hands hovered over her, afraid to touch without permission. Between broken sobs, Analyn explained Adham's discovery and his proposition. The cameras recorded Ruwan's transformation. How his concerned expression hardened into something dangerous. How his normally gentle hands curled into fists. How years of suppressed rage rose to the surface like a physical force. "I'll kill him," he said, the words falling into the room like stones. "I swear, I will kill him." "No." Analyn caught his arm as he moved toward the door. "That solves nothing. They would blame you immediately. You'd be executed." "We have to leave then," Ruwan countered, already moving to the closet where he kept his meager possessions. "Tonight. Now, we take what we can carry and go." The camera captured Analyn's head shaking emphatically. "And go where? Without passports? Without proper papers? With what money? The account is in your friend's name. How quickly could you access it? We'd be arrested at the first checkpoint." Ruwan paced the small room, hands raking through his hair in frustration. The security footage showed his growing agitation, the desperate energy of a trapped animal. "There must be something we can do," he insisted. "Someone who can help. The embassies would tell us to file a police report," Analyn interrupted. "And then what?" "His word against ours. A wealthy Emirati citizen versus 2 foreign workers. Who do you think they would believe?" The silence that followed was heavy with terrible understanding. The cameras recorded them sitting side by side on the bed, shoulders touching, faces etched with the same hopeless realization. There was no legal path forward, no authority they could appeal to, no escape route that didn't lead to financial ruin for their families. "One of us could go," Ruwan finally suggested, voice hollow. "You. I could create a distraction. Get you to the Filipino embassy somehow. And leave you to face this alone? Leave Ligaya with nothing when I can't work legally." Analyn shook her head. "There's only one way this ends, where we both survive." The camera captured Ruwan's confused expression, the moment when Analyn's meaning began to dawn on him. "No, you can't mean. He's destroying people because he can," she whispered, her voice so low the microphones barely caught it. "Because no one stops him. Because power without consequences corrupts absolutely." "Analyn." Ruwan's voice held warning and fear in equal measure. "Don't say things you can't take back." She turned to face him directly, and the camera captured a new expression on her face. Determination replacing desperation, clarity replacing confusion. "If he were gone," she said slowly, "truly gone, what would happen? His father is rarely here. The investigation would be minimal for an accident or natural causes. Foreign workers are replaced every day." The security footage showed Ruwan pulling away slightly, struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the gentle soul he'd fallen in love with. "You're talking about—" "I'm talking about survival," she interrupted. "About Ligaya's future. About your family back home. About the only option that doesn't destroy everything we care about." The camera recorded the silent communication between them, her unwavering gaze, his horrified understanding, the moral precipice they stood upon together. What it couldn't capture was the internal calculations, the weighing of conscience against survival, the terrible clarity that comes when impossible choices must be made. "There would be no coming back from this?" Ruwan finally said, words barely audible. "There's no coming back from what he's proposing either," Analyn replied. "At least this way we choose our fate." The footage showed them sitting in silence for long minutes, neither moving, both staring into a future suddenly darker and more complicated than they had ever imagined. Finally, Ruwan reached for Analyn's hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that now carried the weight of conspiracy. "If we did this," he said, emphasizing the hypothetical, "it would have to be perfect, undetectable." Analyn nodded, her expression settling into grim resolve. "I know how to make it look natural. My nursing training. There are ways." The security camera continued recording as night fell, capturing 2 people sitting close together, speaking too softly for the microphones to detect. What it couldn't record was the exact moment when consideration became commitment, when desperate people chose a desperate path, when survival instinct overwhelmed moral boundaries. The security cameras recorded the next 7 days with the same digital precision as any other week, unaware of the significance behind the subtle changes in household patterns. What appeared to be normal daily routines concealed meticulous preparation and planning, whispered conversations in camera blind spots, and the slow solidification of resolve. Analyn began observing Adham with new attention to detail. The kitchen cameras captured her noting which foods he preferred, which medications he kept in the cabinet beside the refrigerator, his typical evening routines. She quietly monitored his alcohol consumption, his occasional recreational drug use, the timing of his bedtime. Each observation was filed away, never discussed where microphones might hear, shared with Ruwan only in the safest moments. "He takes sleeping pills when he's been drinking," she whispered during their brief, overlapping break in the guesthouse kitchen. "Zopiclone. Strong ones. Prescribed in London." The security footage showed Ruwan's almost imperceptible nod, his face betraying nothing. But the cameras caught the tremor in his hands as he washed dishes later that evening, the way he stared unseeing at the road during his driving duties, the long minutes he spent in prayer each night. A new habit that emerged during this week of planning. Doubt and fear weighed heavily on him. The garage cameras recorded him sitting alone in the parked Mercedes one afternoon, head in his hands, shoulders shaking in what might have been silent sobs. The exterior footage captured him walking the property perimeter at night, looking up at stars barely visible through Dubai's light pollution, his expression tormented. 3 days before they planned to act, Ruwan attempted to back out. The guesthouse cameras recorded their whispered argument in the kitchen, careful to stay beneath the microphone's sensitivity threshold. "There must be another way." His lips formed the words, expression pleading. Analyn shook her head emphatically, mouth moving in shapes that surveillance experts would later interpret as, "There isn't. I've tried everything. He's escalating." The footage showed Ruwan's distress, his hands gesturing futility, his eyes haunted. It captured Analyn reaching across the table, fingers not quite touching his, careful even now to maintain plausible deniability. "If not for me," her lips shaped words too soft to hear. "Then for Ligaya, for your mother, for everyone depending on us." The camera recorded the exact moment Ruwan's resistance crumbled, his shoulders sagging, his head bowing in acceptance. The point of no return had been reached, not with decisive action but with the exhaustion of alternatives. The night of November 15th arrived with deceptive normalcy. The exterior cameras recorded a typical Dubai evening, warm despite the advancing winter, palm trees stirring in a gentle breeze, the distant hum of the city providing background texture to the quiet luxury of the Al Mansour estate. Adham had invited friends over earlier, but, unusually, they had all departed by 10 p.m. The security footage showed him alone, moving between his bedroom and the upstairs entertainment room, already intoxicated from the evening's festivities. He sent a text to Analyn at 10:37 p.m. A message later recovered by investigators. "Decided yet? Time's running out. I'm getting impatient." At 11:15 p.m., the kitchen cameras recorded Analyn preparing a late meal, ostensibly responding to Adham's demand for midnight snacks. Her movements were precise, professional, betraying nothing unusual to the watching lenses. She assembled an elaborate cheese board, sliced fruit arranged in artistic patterns, and prepared a special tea using herbs she'd brought back from her last day off. "Filipino specialty," she'd explained to another staff member earlier that week. "Helps with sleep." What the cameras didn't detect was the additional ingredient in the tea, an extract from oleander plants growing in the villa's ornamental garden, prepared over several days in the privacy of her bathroom. In nursing school, before financial reality interrupted her education, Analyn had studied botanical toxicology. She knew precisely how much was needed to mimic the symptoms of cardiac arrest in someone already compromised by alcohol and sedatives. The living room camera captured her carrying the tray upstairs at precisely 11:43 p.m., her expression appropriately deferential as she knocked on Adham's bedroom door. The footage showed him answering, shirtless and unsteady, leering at her as she entered with the food. The bedroom, the one space without surveillance, became a black box in the investigation. What happened inside could only be reconstructed through physical evidence and the testimony of those involved. According to Analyn's later statement, she served the food and tea, endured Adham's inappropriate comments and attempts to touch her, and left after he began eating. "He wanted me to stay," she told investigators. "I told him I needed to finish cleaning downstairs. He was angry but too drunk to do anything about it." The hallway camera recorded her exit at 11:57 p.m., her face pale but composed, the empty tray held in slightly trembling hands. She returned to the kitchen, meticulously washed the dishes, and retired to the guest house at 12:30 a.m., following her normal routine with mechanical precision. The exterior cameras captured an unusual movement at 2:12 a.m. Ruwan, fully dressed despite the late hour, moving from the guest house toward the main villa. He used his service key to enter through the side door, his movements careful and deliberate. The interior cameras tracked his progress through the darkened house, up the main staircase, toward Adham's bedroom. What happened next occurred beyond the camera's view. Ruwan later claimed he had heard unusual noises and, concerned, went to check on Adham. "I found him on the floor, struggling to breathe. I tried to help him up, tried to call emergency services, but he was already gone by the time I got my phone out." The medical examiner would later determine that Adham Al-Mansour died between 2 o'clock and 2:30 a.m. from apparent cardiac arrest, his system compromised by a combination of alcohol, prescription sedatives, and an unidentified substance that caused respiratory depression. The official ruling would cite accidental overdose complicated by undiagnosed cardiac vulnerability, a medical explanation for a death that appeared, superficially, to be a tragic accident. The hallway camera recorded Ruwan exiting Adham's room at 2:34 a.m., his face ashen, movements unsteady. He returned to the guest house, where the common area camera captured a brief, silent exchange with Analyn, who was waiting despite the late hour. No words were spoken, but her questioning look and his slight nod communicated what had transpired. The household's normal morning routine was shattered at 7:15 a.m. when Layla, the day maid who came to assist with cleaning, arrived to find Analyn already working in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as usual. "Mr. Adham sleeps late today?" Layla asked in the casual mix of English and Arabic the staff used among themselves. "I haven't seen him yet," Analyn replied, her voice steady. "Perhaps he's still tired from his friends visiting." The security footage captured Layla ascending the stairs at 8:45 a.m. to clean the upper rooms. Her surprised pause at Adham's closed door, her hesitant knock. When no answer came, she used her master key to enter. Protocol for cleaning when residents were out. The hallway camera recorded her piercing scream, the sound triggering Analyn to rush upstairs, followed moments later by Ruwan, who had been checking the cars in the garage. It captured the chaos that ensued. Layla collapsed in the hallway, Analyn entering the room to confirm what they already knew. Ruwan calling emergency services with appropriately shaking hands. "Please come quickly," his voice cracked with what sounded like genuine distress. "I think he's dead. The son of Mr. Al-Mansour. Please hurry." The exterior cameras recorded the arrival of police and emergency medical personnel at 9:23 a.m. They captured the clinical efficiency of professionals who see death regularly, the preliminary examination, the official pronouncement, the beginning of a routine investigation into an apparent accidental death. Detective Salim Nazari, assigned to the case, appeared on the security footage at 10:15 a.m. The cameras recorded his methodical movement through the house, his careful questioning of the staff, his particular attention to the food and drink remains in Adham's room. They captured Analyn's perfect performance of shocked grief, Ruwan's convincing display of distress, Layla's genuine breakdown. "Did Mr. Adham have any health problems that you know of?" Detective Nazari asked in the kitchen, where the staff had gathered. "He took pills sometimes to help him sleep," Analyn offered, the picture of helpful cooperation. "And he drank alcohol, of course. He seemed healthy otherwise," Ruwan added. "Young, strong. It's shocking." The investigation proceeded with professional thoroughness, but without the intensity that would have accompanied a suspected homicide. The medical examiner found nothing immediately suspicious. A young man with alcohol and sedatives in his system, signs of cardiac failure consistent with an accidental overdose. The household staff statements aligned perfectly with the security footage. The death appeared tragic but explainable. Mr. Farid Al-Mansour arrived from Singapore at 5:47 p.m., his private jet expediting what would normally be an 8-hour journey. The exterior cameras captured his emergence from a black Rolls-Royce, his face a mask of controlled grief, his movements stiff with shock. Inside, they recorded his terrible stillness as Detective Nazari explained the preliminary findings. The way he stared at his son's bedroom door, now sealed with police tape. An accident? He finally asked, voice hollow. You're certain? All evidence points to accidental overdose, sir, Nazari replied. The full toxicology report will confirm, but there's no indication of foul play. The following days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, official procedures, and the peculiar suspended animation that follows unexpected death. The security cameras recorded Mr. Al-Mansour moving through his home like a ghost, touching his son's possessions with reverent hands, speaking rarely and then only in practical monosyllables. They captured Analyn maintaining the household with quiet efficiency, her movements indicating appropriate respect for a house in mourning. They recorded Ruwan driving Mr. Al-Mansour to the mosque, to the funeral home, to meetings with family members arriving from abroad. Both performed their duties with perfect professional decorum, never revealing the immense relief beneath their carefully composed expressions. 5 days after Adham's death, the guesthouse camera captured their first moment alone together since the incident. Seated at the kitchen table, finally safe from Mr. Al-Mansour's presence as he slept sedated in the main house, they allowed themselves a brief acknowledgement of what they had done. It's over, Ruwan whispered, the words barely audible. Analyn nodded, her expression complex. Relief mingled with something that might have been regret, or perhaps the permanent mark that taking a life leaves on the soul. We're safe now. The camera recorded Ruwan reaching across the table to take her hand openly for the first time in days, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that now carried the weight of shared culpability. 1 more year, he said softly. We stick to the plan. Save everything we can. Then we go home, together. What the security footage couldn't capture was the false security settling over them, the dangerous belief that the worst had passed. They couldn't know that Mr. Al-Mansour, grief-stricken but methodical, had already begun reviewing the past month's security footage in obsessive detail, searching for some explanation for his son's death that made more sense than random tragedy. They couldn't know that Detective Nazari, while officially ruling the death accidental, had privately noted several inconsistencies worth further investigation. They couldn't know that Layla had mentioned to her cousin, who worked as Mr. Al-Mansour's personal assistant. The cameras continued their silent recording, documenting the normal resumption of household routines, the gradual settling of grief into something manageable, the cautious return of hope in the guest house after dark. They captured Analyn and Ruwan gradually becoming less careful about their interactions. Small touches and meaningful glances exchanged with the belief that no one was watching closely anymore. What the footage couldn't show was the invisible noose of evidence tightening around them, or the inevitable unraveling that would soon follow. If this perfect crime is keeping you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe. Analyn and Ruwan believe they've executed a flawless plan, but in a house built on surveillance, no secret stays buried forever. The investigation that's about to unfold will expose not just what happened that night, but the complex web of power, desperation, and manipulation that led to a young man's death. Make sure to hit that notification bell, because the truth is about to emerge in ways none of them anticipated. Grief manifests differently across cultures, but for Farid Al-Mansour, it crystallized into methodical obsession. While the official investigation concluded, while funeral prayers echoed through marble mosques, while condolence visitors filled his reception rooms, Farid retreated nightly to his private study. There, surrounded by screens displaying his home's security system, he began reconstructing his son's final weeks. Mr. Al-Mansour barely sleeps, Ruwan confided to Analyn one evening in the guesthouse kitchen. He sits reviewing footage until dawn, then works all day as if nothing is wrong. What Ruwan couldn't know was exactly what Farid was finding in those hours of digital surveillance. The first threads that would unravel their carefully constructed facade. It began with small inconsistencies. The exterior cameras captured Analyn collecting plants from the ornamental garden 3 days before Adam's death. Oleander leaves carefully selected and hidden in her cleaning apron. The kitchen footage showed her preparing Adam's final meal with unusual attention to detail, particularly the tea service she'd never before offered him at night. Most damning was the timestamp on Ruwan's night visit to the main house, 2:12 a.m., exactly when Adam's smartwatch recorded his heart rate spiking before flatline. Farid, a businessman who had built his fortune on attention to detail, compiled these observations methodically. 2 weeks after his son's death, he contacted Shatter International Security, a private firm staffed by former intelligence officers, requesting their expertise in surveillance analysis. "There's something not right about my son's death," he told Omar Khalid, the firm's lead investigator. "I need professional confirmation before approaching authorities." The evidence Shatter uncovered was devastating. Enhanced audio processing revealed whispered conversations between Analyn and Ruwan that the standard system had categorized as background noise. Careful review of camera blind spots documented their pattern of secret meetings. Most significantly, facial recognition analysis captured microexpressions during their interviews with police, subtle tells of deception that human observers had missed. "They're involved romantically," Omar confirmed during his presentation to Farid. "And based on timing and behavior patterns, they likely conspired in your son's death." The morning after this confirmation, Detective Nazari received a call requesting his immediate presence at the Al Mansour villa. He arrived to find Farid surrounded by digital evidence, his grief now hardened into cold determination. "My son was murdered," Farid stated without preamble, "and I can prove it." The police investigation reopened with intensity that had been absent in its initial phase. Preserved samples from Adam's room underwent additional toxicological screening, revealing traces of oleander extract mixed with the tea dregs. Forensic examination of Adam's smartwatch data showed a pattern consistent with poisoning rather than spontaneous cardiac arrest. Staff interviews expanded to include the day workers, whose observations of household dynamics added crucial context. "Mr. Adam was always difficult with Miss Analyn," Layla confirmed during her second interview. "Very inappropriate, demanding. Sometimes I would hear him making suggestions, not nice ones." As evidence mounted, the investigation focused increasingly on Ruwan, whose midnight visit to the main house placed him directly at the scene. The garage cameras had captured him cleaning the Mercedes with unusual thoroughness the morning after Adam's death, potentially removing evidence. His behavior in the days following showed none of the disorientation typical of uninvolved witnesses to unexpected death. 4 weeks after Adam's death, Dubai police arrived at the Al Mansour villa with a warrant for Ruwan's arrest. The exterior cameras recorded his stunned expression as officers approached him beside the Bentley he was polishing, the momentary flash of panic quickly suppressed beneath his customary professional facade. "Ruwan Perera, you are under arrest for the murder of Adham Al Mansour," Detective Nazari announced, the words captured clearly by the driveway microphones. The interrogation room camera recorded Ruwan's gradual disintegration over the next 48 hours. Initially composed, he maintained his innocence through the first questioning session, his story perfectly aligned with his previous statements. By the second day, as evidence mounted and sleep deprivation took its toll, cracks began appearing in his narrative. "I loved my job," he insisted, voice hoarse from hours of questioning. "Mr. Al Mansour was always fair to me. Why would I harm his son?" "Perhaps not for yourself," Detective Nazari suggested. "Perhaps for someone else. For Analyn." The camera captured Ruwan's minute flinch at her name, the first confirmation that investigators had found his vulnerability. "She had nothing to do with this," he stated too quickly. "Nothing. Then explain why she's disappeared," Nazari countered, placing photographs before him. "Why her room was emptied while you were being arrested. Why she withdrew all her savings from Dubai Islamic Bank yesterday morning." The interrogation room camera documented the precise moment realization dawned on Ruwan's face, the widening eyes, parted lips, the small backward movement as if physically struck. Throughout his questioning, he had operated under the assumption that he and Analyn were facing this investigation together. The truth crashed through his remaining defenses with devastating clarity. "That's not possible," he whispered. "She wouldn't leave. We had plans." Back at the Almansor villa, the investigation team made a critical discovery in the guesthouse garden. A burner phone buried in a potted plant, factory reset but containing a SIM card that tech specialists were able to partially recover. The fragmented data revealed messages between Analyn and an unknown contact spanning months before Adham's death, discussing payment arrangements and escape plans that had nothing to do with Ruwan. "I'll make him believe it's his idea," one recovered message read. "Men always want to be the hero. Just need access to the accounts before I disappear." The most damning evidence emerged from immigration records. Analyn had exited the UAE through Abu Dhabi rather than Dubai, using documentation that investigation revealed she'd been preparing for months. Most shocking was her destination, not the Philippines as expected, but Malaysia, where a facial recognition match placed her in Kuala Lumpur alongside a European man previously identified in photos on her confiscated phone. As these discoveries unfolded, Ruwan sat in a detention cell, the surveillance camera recording his gradual psychological collapse, as investigators revealed the extent of his manipulation. The footage showed him shaking his head in disbelief when shown evidence that Analyn had been planning her escape long before their relationship began, that their chance encounter on the guesthouse balcony had been carefully orchestrated, that her emotional breakdowns had been precisely timed performances. "She used you," Detective Nazari stated bluntly during their final interview. Her previous employer in Saudi Arabia died under similar circumstances. Apparent heart failure after she served him specially prepared food. No charges were filed, but she disappeared immediately after, resurfacing in Dubai with new documentation. The camera captured Ruwan's hands covering his face, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I thought we were saving each other," he whispered. Further investigation revealed a pattern stretching back years. Analyn moving between wealthy households in the Gulf, forming strategic relationships with other staff members, creating situations that ended either with theft or suspicious deaths. The nursing training she'd claimed to have abandoned had actually been completed, giving her precise knowledge of how to administer untraceable poisons. "Her real name isn't even Analyn Macaraig," Detective Nazari explained. "That identity was stolen from a woman who died in Manila 5 years ago. We don't know who she really is." The most devastating revelation came when investigators located Ligaya, not the daughter Analyn had claimed to support, but her younger sister and accomplice, living comfortably in Singapore on funds transferred after each successful operation. The photographs Analyn had shared, the emotional phone calls, the entire narrative of maternal sacrifice, all carefully constructed fiction designed to evoke sympathy and trust. 3 months after Adham's death, Ruwan Perera stood trial for murder. The courtroom cameras recorded his transformation from the dignified driver, who had once maintained luxury vehicles with meticulous care, to a hollow-eyed defendant who barely raised his head during proceedings. Despite his lawyer's arguments about coercion and manipulation, the evidence of his direct involvement was irrefutable. The footage of him entering Adham's room, his fingerprints on the teacup, his documented research on security camera blind spots, all pointed to conscious participation rather than unwitting manipulation. Farid Al-Mansour attended every day of the trial, his face impassive as the details of his son's final hours were dissected in clinical detail. When permitted to address the court during sentencing, he spoke with the measured control of someone whose grief had crystallized into purpose. "My son was not a perfect man," he acknowledged, his voice echoing in the hushed courtroom. "He had privileges he did not appreciate and power he sometimes misused. But he was just 18 years old, with time to grow and learn. That opportunity was stolen from him by people who lived under my roof, ate at my table, and planned his death with cold precision." The international manhunt for Analyn continued across Southeast Asia, hampered by her facility with false identities and border crossings. Occasional sightings placed her in Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, always one step ahead of authorities, reportedly with different appearance and companions each time. The burner phone data suggested she had multiple extraction plans prepared, a network of contacts across the region, and financial resources hidden beyond what investigators initially estimated. Ruwan's sentence, 25 years in a UAE prison, was broadcast across international media, reigniting debates about migrant worker conditions in the Gulf states. Human rights organizations pointed to the case as emblematic of the desperation created by the kafala sponsorship system. Labor rights advocates highlighted how power imbalances and document confiscation created fertile ground for exploitation and, ultimately, violence. What these debates often missed, however, was the complex reality captured in the surveillance footage from the Al Mansour household, how vulnerability could coexist with calculation, how real affection could be weaponized for exploitation, how systems of power created victims who sometimes became perpetrators themselves. In his final police interview, Ruwan made a statement that perhaps best encapsulated the tragedy's true dimensions. "I don't know anymore who betrayed whom," he said, voice barely audible to the recording equipment. "Adham abused his power over Analyn. Analyn manipulated my feelings for her. I betrayed Mr. Al Mansour's trust. Perhaps we all betrayed ourselves most of all." The Al Mansour villa stands empty now, its rooms preserved exactly as they were on the morning Adham was found. The security cameras continue their silent recording, documenting vacant spaces and untouched furnishings. Occasionally, Farid visits, walking the grounds like a ghost in his own life, searching the footage as if it might finally yield the one answer that has eluded him. Not how his son died, but how human beings living under the same roof could become so desperately estranged from one another's humanity. The guest house remains locked, its modest furnishings undisturbed, the teacups Analyn and Ruwan once shared still sitting in the cabinet. Physical artifacts of a connection that might have been genuine on one side, calculated on the other, or perhaps something more complicated than either extreme. The surveillance footage, now archived in police evidence storage, offers thousands of hours of their interactions but no definitive answer to the fundamental question at the heart of this tragedy. When does survival justify betrayal? When does justice become vengeance? When does victimhood create permission for victimizing others? Subscribe and hit that notification bell because the truth about human exploitation is more terrifying than fiction. Our next investigation examines the case of domestic workers trapped in diplomatic households, where international law creates perfect immunity for those who abuse their power. But before you go, tell us in the comments, who do you think was the real victim in this story? The privileged son who never learned consequences? The driver who loved unwisely? The maid with a talent for manipulation? Or the system that placed them all on a collision course with tragedy?